I recall the day when everything started to shift. Like every other Tuesday morning, it wasn't exactly like this one. I was in the kitchen attempting to prepare breakfast for our 4-year-old, Jamie, who was running around with great energy. Mark was in the dining room, most likely checking emails from work, already deeply engrossed in his phone. Mark and I met at his family's business. He was in finance, and I began off in marketing. We got along well during a work picnic. We tied the knot 2 years later. After the wedding, things changed, but I still believed it to be love. Mark's family insisted that I stay home and raise a family. It's fortunate, they said. I had no idea at the time that it was the start of my losing my identity. Mom, I'm craving pancakes. Jamie's words interrupted me while I was thinking. I said, coming right up, honey, while reversing a pancake in the skillet. The piercing, shitty sound of Mark's voice cut through the early morning air. Sarah, will it take the entire day? I have a crucial meeting coming up. Sorry, just finishing up here, I responded, attempting to maintain composure. As I arranged the dishes on the table, there appeared to be more noise than normal. Mark gave the food a cursory glance. He silently said, "This bacon is undercooked," and pushed the dish aside. Though it stung in my chest, I forced myself to drink it. With a big smile on my face, I responded, "I'll remember that for next time." Ignoring the stress, Jamie babbled on about his toy cars. I admired his naivety. As though on cue, Margaret, Mark's mother, picked that exact time to make her dramatic entry. "Sarah, my love, allow me to demonstrate the correct way to cook bacon. Crispy is Mark's favorite food." I observed her seizing control of my life, my house, and my kitchen. As the matriarch, Margaret always kept a close watch on everything. There I stood, her undertaking. "You need to cook it for a longer period of time on low heat." With a smug look on her face, Margaret remarked, "If you paid more attention, you'd know." Mark gave me a nod of assent without looking at me. "Mom is the expert," he declared. I swallowed my rejoinder and concentrated on Jamie's beaming smile while he ate his pancakes. Feeling more alone than ever, I stood there in the middle of the half-eaten breakfast and sizzling pans as they excited the kitchen, Margaret smiling contentedly and Mark engrossed to his phone. The days stretched into weeks, and Mark and I got more apart. Living with a stranger was how it felt. We hardly chatted. He arrived home late and departed early. It seemed like I was talking to a wall as I attempted to close the distance. I decided to prepare his favorite spaghetti bolognese one evening. I stayed in the kitchen for hours on end, hoping something, any kind of spark, would return. I prepared the table, lighted the candles, and played music that we used to dance to. Mark didn't even realize how much work had gone into it until he got home. He simply sat into his chair and stared at his phone. He prodded at the spaghetti and inquired, "What's this?" With my voice almost audible above a whisper, I added, "I thought I'd make your favorite." He bit off and threw up. "It tastes excessively salty. Have you not tasted it?" A lump formed in my throat. I believed it to be all right. He tossed the dish aside. "I refuse to consume this. Let me get a pizza." As I cleaned the unfinished meal, my heart fell. I had the impression that I was discarding more than simply noodles. Bless his soul, Jamie attempted to lighten the situation. "Mom, may I also have pizza?" I attempted to grin for him. "Of course, sweetie," but the stillness that followed was unbearable. As I nibbled at my food, Mark consumed his pizza, his gaze fixed on the television. The distance felt like a gulf between us. The following day was the same. Mark entered the room while I was folding clothes, his face as dark as a thunderstorm. With a kick at a toy vehicle that Jamie had placed on the floor, he angrily said, "Can't you do something about all this mess?" I tried to keep up, but it may be difficult with Jamie, I said, growing impatient. "Well, give it more effort." He shot back, not even bothering to look at me. It's not rocket science to keep a house clean. I mentally counted to 10 while biting my tongue. Mark, I'm trying my hardest. He said, your best isn't good enough, and stormed inside his office, which he had taken over as a spare room. Every day it was this way. The man I married was no longer with me. He used to listen to me and make me laugh. I could hardly recognize this icy, uncaring person in his place. That night, I became aware of how alone I felt as I laid in bed and heard Mark's breathing. It seemed as though the man beside me was a million miles away. I missed our previous connection, warmth, and affection. Above all, though, I missed the guy I believed to be my spouse. And somewhere in the shadows, it occurred to me that perhaps this was the beginning of the end. When Mark was elevated to the position of CEO of the family business, things quickly changed. It seemed as though the title turned on a light bulb in him. He began returning home even later, or not at all, at times. It was like living with a monarch who didn't think his palace was nice enough while he was at home. He entered one evening with a swagger, exuding self-importance and expensive fragrance. Looking at me like I was an antiquated piece of furniture, he remarked, "Sarah, we need to talk about your appearance." It surprised me. "How do I look? How about that?" With a sigh, he seemed to be giving a youngster an explanation. "You've abandoned yourself. It is awkward. I currently lead a sizable corporation. You cannot look like this for me." My cheeks began to burn. "I'm looking after the house and Jamie. I really don't have time for a beauty regimen." He rolled his eyes. "Apologies. You could find the time if you truly cared. Become a member of a gym. Take action." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. So now it's all about looking the part? Whatever happened to accepting me as I am? He sneered. That was before I knew I was capable of more. "Sarah, get in shape or I may have to make some adjustments." I was unable to speak. The father of my kid and the guy I had loved told me I was no longer good enough for him. He was the water in my drowning-like sensation. I tried to talk to him about it the next day, assuming that he wasn't serious and had just been in a foul mood. He was browsing through his phone in the kitchen while drinking his pricey coffee. "Mark, speaking about last night." With shaking hands, I said, "I think we need to talk." He didn't raise his gaze. "Sarah, not just now. I'm attending a meeting. However, this is crucial." "You wounded me," I urged. When he did glance at me, his eyes were icy. I expressed what had to be expressed. "Not me, but you are the one who has to change." A tear started to roll down my face. "You loved me exactly the way I was once." He gave a snort. That was before to my self-realization. "You ought to as well." I felt like a part of my heart had broken as I walked away. My husband was no longer with me. This stranger who made me feel tiny and unworthy took his seat and judged me. I became aware of my options as I laid in bed that evening and took in the quiet of the house. I either remain and wither beneath his disdain, or I could go and attempt to rediscover who I was. Though it was a terrible concept, I felt a glimmer of optimism for the first time in a long time. I could be strong enough to start over, maybe, just maybe. I was fully aware how ignored I felt during one of those really formal family dinners. The setting of the dinner table was magazine perfect, but the mood was everything from cozy. Robert, Mark's father, and Mark were deep in conversation about the family company. I just sat there, a mute witness, as if no one else noticed me. The quarterly reports require careful consideration. Robert said, his voice hard and businesslike, "Sales must pick up." Mark answered right away, "We may even consider entering new international markets as part of our marketing expansion." When I heard this, I had to say something. When I was only a housewife, marketing was my domain and my passion. "Have you given digital marketing any thought?" With some hesitation, I said, "Social media platforms might be a terrific method to extend your audience." A pause, the type that lasts just long enough to get awkward, occurred. Then Robert started laughing, which disappointed me. "Social media. Assume that, Sarah. Your desire to assist is sweet, but shall we just let the business talk to ourselves?" Mark laughed in a condescending way and joined in. Sarah, stick to what you do well. Let us take care of the business. I blushed with humiliation and rage. My experience is in marketing. My criticisms are well-founded. I shot back, becoming slightly angrier. Robert waved his hand at me, dismissing me. My darling, it was years ago. You're not in the know. These days, you have other obligations. The remainder of the supper passed in a whirl of rage and embarrassment. Their remarks hurt because they disregarded not only my opinions, but also who I am. I was more than what they thought I was. Later, I visited my dad because I needed some comfort and encouragement. He was the one who always inspired me to follow my aspirations and served as my rock. Dad, they just brushed me off like I don't matter. I replied, my voice colored with rage and sadness. Dad said, his voice a mixture of worry, and I told you so. Sarah, I've always told you about Mark and his family's nature. I understand, Dad, but I didn't think it would become this terrible. They treat me like I'm invisible. I conceded, giving up. Sarah, you're not a ghost. You're capable and intelligent. Keep your dignity intact, he said, his voice stern. Dad, I feel stuck though. I felt hopeless as I said, I don't know what to do. My dad startled me at that point. What if we make a few slight adjustments? I have some money stashed away from some profitable ventures. What if I invested in Mark's family business with shares? I looked at him, thinking that I had misheard. You're kidding, surely. No, I'm not kidding. It's about time someone let them know you're not to be taken lightly. Despite the circumstances, I laughed. It was ludicrous, yet somehow rewarding, to think of my dad, the outsider, becoming involved in their valuable family company. One typical Tuesday, my life as I knew it came crumbling down. I dismissed my prolonged sense of being unwell as being caused by stress or exhaustion. I was able to ignore it for a while until I discovered a lump. The doctor's appointment wasn't what it seemed like it would be. The words struck me like a ton of bricks as I sat in the antiseptic doctor's office. Sarah, I apologize, but this is breast cancer. You must get therapy right now even if we discovered it early. Numb, I sat there. Cancer. Me. It is not possible. But by the look on the doctor's grey face, I knew it was all too genuine. I have a family and a son. What choices do I have? Even to me, my voice seemed far away. The doctor softly stated, we'll talk about treatment plans, but it's important we start soon. In a trance, I strolled home. How can I inform Mark? How can I inform Jamie? I was terrified and unsure about everything. When I arrived home, Mark was as usual engrossed to his laptop in the living room. I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper, Mark, we need to talk. He looked up, irritated. Sarah, what now? I'm busy, can't you see that? I inhaled deeply. It's severe. Today, I visited the doctor. My breast cancer is real. There was stillness for a little. Then he said something that I will always remember. Cancer? Excellent, more drama. Just what I needed. I looked at him, hurt and incredulity at odds inside of me. Mark, did you hear me say that? My illness is cancer. With a groan, he snapped the lid off his laptop. Yes, I did hear you. What does this mean, then? More trips to the doctor. How will this impact the business and me? I was unable to speak. How could he be that apathetic? It indicates that I require medical attention, Mark. I require assistance. Rating about the room, he got up. Well, you best solve it right away. You cannot neglect Jamie's needs and you're cleaning at the same time. I thought I was in a bad dream. Is that all that matters to you? The home, the job, how about myself? He paused and stared at me as if I were an issue that needed to be fixed. It's not that I don't care, Sarah, but you have to realize that the timing is awful. We need to manage our business. The remainder of the talk flew by. His remarks resembled daggers, piercing more deeply with each one. In this, I was genuinely alone. The weeks that followed were filled with treatments, appointments, and extreme exhaustion. It was too much for me to keep up with Jamie and the house. Mark could take no more. I was too tired to prepare one evening after a particularly taxing therapy. "Can we place an order for tonight, Mark? I simply can't handle it." He sneered. "Place another order. How come I keep you around if you can't even prepare a basic meal?" It was a devastating blow to my heart as much as my body. My operation day was hanging over me like a threatening cloud. Not only was I afraid of the operation itself, but I was also afraid of what life would be like following. Would I feel like a different lady when I woke up? My physique had turned from being something I was proud of. It was unexpected for Mark to grasp my hand and reassure me that everything will be well. Those were long ago times. However, I had hoped for some sort of assistance. Rather, what I received was apathy. Mark was busy getting ready for work while I was getting ready for the hospital. "I assume you'll be all right." He didn't even look at me as he continued. "The physicians know what they're doing." "Yeah, I suppose," I said, attempting to maintain my composure. His hand was on the doorknob as he hesitated. "Tell me when it's finished. I have a crucial meeting coming up. Not to be missed." A lump started to grow in my throat. "Yes, I'll give a call." The procedure was a haze, but the worst part was waking up. Where a part of me once been, I sensed a vacuum. When I opened my eyes, my parents' faces were there, their love and worry inscribed on them. "Dad, Mom." With tears running down my cheeks, I mumbled, "My dear, we are here." Mom remarked, "We're here," and she took my hand. Neither that day nor the following, Mark failed to appear. He never made a call. It was as though my disease and my operation were just small annoyances that were best left unseen. My recuperation was a drawn-out process, but in the end, I was permitted to return home. Not knowing what to anticipate from Mark, I feared it. I was shocked when I got home. It wasn't just Mark. In my living room stood a young woman who looked to be in her late 20s. She touched his arm in a way that was familiar and laughed at something he said. I received the impression that I had entered someone else's world. "Mark, what's happening?" I sounded hoarse, still debilitated by the operation. Startled, he raised his head. Then his face became stern. "Sarah, come talk with me in the kitchen." He seemed abrupt and distant in the kitchen. "Divorce is what I want. I've had another encounter. You're not the spouse I was married to." Nude, I stood there. The ache in my chest was far worse than the discomfort I had after my operation. Divorce. As a result of her, owing to this, my voice increasing, I stroked the bandage on my chest. "It goes beyond that. You've evolved, always so depressed and so naive. I need someone living and energetic, not this." He gave me a contemptuous gesture. I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. "Mark, I have cancer. I underwent surgery. What were your expectations?" He gave a shrug. "This isn't it, I'm not sure. I've moved on. You ought to as well." The divorce papers he gave me were still warm from the printer. "Leave the house, please. It's a good thing." I turned to face him and saw how unfamiliar he had grown. "Where should I go now?" "That is not an issue for me. Work things out." My hands trembling, I packed a suitcase. Luckily, Jamie was not affected by this nightmare when he was at my parents'. I turned to gaze behind me at the home, my life, and the guy I had loved. All of it was gone, to be replaced by a hard, cold reality. I was a shell of the person I had been before I moved in with my parents after the divorce. The disease, the operation, and the betrayal all had an impact. However, something surprising occurred during those times of sorrow. I was drinking a cup of coffee while seated at the kitchen table with my dad. We were comfortable with each other's quiet. Dad surprised me by asking a question that broke the ice. "Sarah, do you recall that I mentioned considering purchasing stock in Mark's business?" Startled, I glanced up. "Yes, I had assumed you were kidding." With a grave expression in his eyes, he shook his head. "I wasn't. I carried it out. I currently have a sizable stake in the business." I almost knocked my cup over. "You what?" He gave a nod. "Yes, I did utilize my savings from investments." Everything is above board and lawful. Currently, I hold 80% of the shares. I was unable to speak. The fact that Dad owned a large portion of Mark's family business was enormous. It was not a real-life twist. It was the type you would anticipate in a movie. But why, Dad? While still shaking from the shock, I managed to inquire. He sipped on his coffee and responded, "Because my daughter is safe from harm. It was also a profitable investment opportunity. Despite Mark, the firm is strong." His action overwhelmed a part of me, but it also ignited a part of me that I had long since forgotten. Justice was more to my taste than retaliation. That was an unrelated tale. "Dad, how do you intend to use those shares?" My curiosity piqued, so I inquired. He smiled. "That's really up to you, Sarah. You possess both business sense and marketing expertise. You have a lot of potential with this. Me, managing the business that Mark and his family formerly owned and operated. It was ridiculous, daring, and exhilarating. However, I'm not sure if I'm up for it." I paused, uncertainty beginning to seep in. Dad put his hand on mine, his eyes kind. "You underestimate your strengths, Sarah. You've experienced both agony and relief. This could be your moment to rise above the ashes and reveal your true self to them, Sarah." Though absurd, the concept had immense impact. I had been denigrated and made to feel little and unimportant for years. However, I now had the ability to reverse it and make things different. I considered it for a few days, analyzing the advantages and disadvantages. It went beyond simple retaliation, taking charge of my life and demonstrating to myself that I was more than what Mark and his family believed of me were the main goals. At last, I decided what to do. I had intended to do that. I intended to acquire the business and turn it into my own. Although it was a terrifying idea, I felt motivated and had a feeling of purpose for the first time in a long time. "I'll do it, Dad. I'll take over the company," I declared with a calm, assured voice. Dad's eyes sparkled as he grinned. "I anticipated that you would. I'll schedule a board meeting. They all to get to know the new majority shareholder." It was finally the day of the shareholders' meeting, the day I would finally step foot in a world I had been excluded from for so long. Taking a deep breath, I stood outside the corporate building. Mark and his father were inside waiting for the new majority shareholder to arrive, as was the board. A surprise was in store for them. I pushed open the doors and entered the boardroom feeling more confident than I have in years, dressed in my finest suit. Their expressions were so precious. "Sarah, why are you in this place?" Mark stumbled, a mixture of bewilderment and shock on his face. I felt like I had all eyes on me as I sat at the head of the table. The primary shareholder is now me. My father's money has allowed me to acquire 80% of this business. A moment of startled quiet fell. The board members then started talking in whispers. Mark's father, Robert, recovered first. "There must be a joke here somewhere," he stated in a rough tone. "Robert, this is not a joke." With a firm tone, I answered, "I'm here to make some adjustments." Mark's pallid face remained fixed on mine. "This is ridiculous, Sarah. A corporation cannot be run by you." With a little contented smile, I spoke. "You'll see that I'm more than competent. Actually, I have goals to grow the business and boost profitability, and part of those plans include updating our strategy and utilizing digital marketing, something I had previously proposed, to which many scoffed." The board members were paying close attention now. I confidently and intelligently explained my intentions. I noticed affirmative nods and a few of amazed looks. Mark came over to me with a frantic expression as the conference came to an end. "Please, Sarah, let's discuss this. We are able to resolve this." I turned to face the guy who, at my lowest point, had abandoned me, deceived me, and denigrated me. "Mark, there's nothing to discuss. You choose what to do. I've made mine now." I retreated as he extended his hand. "I apologize, Sarah. I was a novice at what I was doing. Give me a chance, please." With a determined resolution, I shook my head. "Mark, it's too late for that. I've moved on since you exposed your true nature to me." As I left the boardroom, I felt as though a burden had been lifted. From the devastated lady who left Mark's house with a bag and a broken heart, I had gone a long way. I had reclaimed my life and my destiny. The city was bathed in a warm glow as the sun descended. I paused to appreciate the beauty of a fresh start. With a smile on my lips, I said to myself, "Here's to new beginnings."